Well, hello, Daniel Aubrey. Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast. I'm so excited to be talking to you this morning.
Hi there, thank you very much. No, it's lovely to be here.
Brilliant. So you live in Moffat in South Scotland. Did I say that
I do.
right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
You
yeah.
are brilliant. But you're originally from Cheshire, Staffordshire, so my
Yes,
local area.
that's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Grew up, as I said, in sort of Alsager, Kidsgrove, that kind of area. So yeah,
Yeah, so for anybody listening, this is local talent. So yeah, so you still work, which I think people don't realize, but a lot of authors, published authors, even best-selling authors, still work.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a few bestsellers that are still working away. So I've maybe got a while yet before I can quit the day job, sadly. But
Yeah. Oh well, fingers crossed it'll be sooner rather
fingers
than
crossed.
later. Yeah, because you are making it big, and you're on the long list for the Saltire Society Scotland. You've been shortlisted for your debut novel, which is for Bloody Scotland, and for the Old Peculiar Harrogate McDermid Award. So yeah, you are set for big things, it seems.
I mean, I don't know about that, but yeah, it's been. It's definitely going better than I had anticipated. I don't think I had sort of any expectations coming into it, but getting on a shortlist would have been fantastic. Getting on a couple and a long list as well. And the Saltire Award is for all fiction in Scotland as well, not just crime fiction. So that was a surprise, shall we say. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's certainly going quite well.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations. We'll come to your debut novel shortly, and I'll read out the back for people because I've finished reading this a couple of weeks ago, and I was hooked. And we were talking before. There's a lot of things that kind of happened, some of these twists that I was not expecting. So it was a
Yeah.
really, really good read. But if actually, let me just say that we first met, or sort of I first came across you because you were a visiting author at the local library,
I
and you
was,
gave a
yeah.
talk. It was a packed
Yeah.
out talk, actually. It was
It
really
was.
good.
That was a really good crowd. I was blown away by that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought, oh, I wonder if he'll be interested in coming on the podcast. So just to slide sideline there for people is just go for it and ask questions.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Yes. Why not?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, if I could just ask you, Daniel, where did your author journey start, and what part did reading and writing play in your childhood? So, how did you kind of come to be, yes, I'm going to write, and you wrote, your debut novel?
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a conscious choice. I mean, I always wrote as a kid, even as well. Um, I found that when there were stories that I liked or was interested in, I kind of I wanted to do that too. I wanted to replicate it, not that I wanted to copy, but it's something I wanted to do. I, I don't think I was a massive reader as a kid. I was kind of more into films, I think. So stories were still a big part of it. I was diagnosed a couple of years ago with ADHD, and I think that might have played into it. Like, I don't have the attention span when I was a kid for books. I needed that sort of like immediate, instant gratification of films. And I remember I can't believe I'm going to admit to this, but I was really into the Police Academy films as a little kid.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm really, and it just, and I started writing these American cop stories, and obviously they were just ridiculous. But then
You're
again,
showing your age there, Daniel.
I really am. I really am. I was going to say the Police Academy ones were ridiculous as well, so it was probably on a par, to be fair. But yeah, I just love that, just sort of like making up stories and sort of escaping into another world, I guess, and yeah, and that's just always stayed with me. Writing's always been a thing I've loved. I became a journalist. I was a translator as well, so it's always been sort of like part of my professional life. Um, but actually, sort of taking it seriously, it wasn't until maybe um, yeah, 8 years ago. It was when my granddad died, and I'd had this story sort of rattling around my head for ages. This idea of a person that sort of time travelled through their memories. And my granddad had dementia before he died. And I don't know if anybody's ever sort of met anybody with Alzheimer's or any form of dementia. It can be quite strange how they'll be talking and seem perfectly lucid, and then in the next moment there'll be some other place, some other time, as if it's real to them. And so I sort of started writing that story, I guess, as kind of almost like a bit of therapy, I suppose, of a
Yeah.
way of sort of like coping with the grief. Um, and basically with anything I do, any hobby I start, it's going to go all the way. Like I never start and then I think, oh, I'll just tinker at this. Like, as soon as I sat down and started writing, it's like, oh yeah, I'll get published. Why not? So yeah, so I'd written that story and I started showing it to. Actually did a course, an online course, a self-edit course, and that was the first time I shared it with people outside of sort of like immediate family and friends, and the reaction was positive. So that was me. That was it then. I was encouraged.
Yeah.
And it just kind of went from there, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like you had the right sort of headspace for it as well. You got into it, you enjoyed it, you thought, yeah, I can do this. You were quite
Yeah.
determined to get to
Well,
that end stage.
yeah, it wasn't even a kind of I can do this. It's very strange. I don't know. As I said, I've got ADHD. I've been diagnosed autistic as well, and a feature of both those things is having, I think, what they call it is special interests. So sometimes we'll get really fixated on a topic or an activity or something like that, and I do, and I switch and I'll flip, and every time I get into something, like I say, that's it. I was into acting as a kid. I was going to go to Hollywood, not
Yeah.
because I believed I could, but just because, well, why would you? That's clearly
Yeah.
the end goal. So it was the same with writing. I got into it. I started writing. I was like, oh yeah, I'll publish a book. Very naive, and then you sort of start to find out what the steps of it are. But yeah, I just kind of unquestioningly just sort of kept going, quite stubbornly, I suppose. Um, that book that I wrote, that first one after my granddad died, because I'd had that positive feedback, I went to a writing festival and took it to a couple of agents there. There was the opportunity to sort of sit down and get feedback from them. And because I'd had that positive feedback, I sort of went expecting, thinking, oh, this could be good. I was really excited. Sat down with the first agent, and she was sort of like, "Is it is it all written like this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah."
Okay.
I think it was good. Oh yeah, it is. And she was like, okay. And sort of
Okay.
started telling me why maybe it
Oops.
shouldn't be. Yeah, but do you know what? That was actually really helpful because then I sat down with the second one and she said the same things. So they gave me some really good feedback. So from that, I went away, tried to rewrite that book with the feedback, couldn't, but I had another idea for another story. So I just kept writing. So I wrote another book based on that feedback, and that was the one that got me signed with an agent.
Mm.
So yeah, I just, like I said, just stubbornly, blindly, just kept going until.
Yeah. I think you have to keep going, don't you? You have to kind of think, yeah, there's something here, and just finding perhaps the right outlet for it, but maybe the shape of it as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I think when it comes to publishing, it's about, it's so subjective. It is just about finding the people who know what it is that you're trying to do and understand the story and believe in it as much as you do, or more than you do in a lot of cases. Um, Sorry, my dog's just arrived.
I've just seen a little tail wagging, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Good timing. So yeah, so I just, yeah, you just, that's it. You just keep going, and that was essentially my journey. I started. I'd always written, and it was something that I just loved doing. So I just kept doing it, I guess, and here we are.
Yeah.
Which does really simplify it, make it sound, I'm oversimplifying it obviously, and it makes it sound easy, and it wasn't. But yeah, it is. I guess essentially it is a case of if it's something you love doing, just keep doing it.
Just keep doing it. Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think I was going to ask you a little bit later, but because you've mentioned the sort of publishing journey that you've
Oh, sorry.
been through,
Yeah.
no, no, not at all. These things they need to be a little bit more fluid as the conversation goes. So you obviously published down
Yes.
the traditional route. Did you ever
Mhm.
consider self-publishing, or because I know I'm on quite a few email lists.
Yeah.
There's a couple of writing organisations that I'm a member of their community, and quite often these agent opportunities come up,
Yeah.
and some of them you can book a slot when you go to a festival, some you sort of pay for slots with people, but
Yeah.
I was going to do that when I'm a little bit more into my writing journey, to get some really constructive feedback from people
I
that
would
know
recommend it.
know
Yeah.
what they're doing. So yeah, was that
Yeah.
always something that you thought, yes, I'm going to
Again,
do
no,
this?
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. I didn't really have it that planned out, which is probably going to be a theme that crops up a lot while we're talking today. I just, yeah, but I think when I'd written the story, and I suppose it was like the next question was, okay, so now what? What do you do? And that's when I did the online course, and that was run by a company that's now called Jericho Writers, and they offer
Oh
these.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, you've maybe heard of them. Yeah, they offer sort of the agent thing. In fact, I think they ran the festival as well that I went to in York, which I think is now in London.
think it
Um,
is. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
summer festival, isn't it? From
that's the one.
memory, I
Yeah, I think
think.
that's what it's
Yeah.
called, Summer Festival of Writing. That.
Mm,
Um, and well, and on that course, obviously I met other people that were writing, and before then it had just been me sort of sitting on my own, just writing away. I didn't know any other writers, didn't know anybody else that did this. I wasn't telling anybody that I was doing it. But I met other people through this course, and one in particular we became quite good friends. And she'd sent her book off to an agent and started getting some good feedback from them. And so yeah, that's when I sort of started looking. Okay, so what is the next step? And at that point, um, everything I was seeing was about the traditional route, sort of like get an agent, get a publisher, go that way. But through the friend that made it was Nima Shah, who's got a great book out. She did get signed by the agent. She got signed by a publisher. Her
excellent.
book Colola Hill is out there now. There's a little pitch. Um, and through her, we met lots of other writers as well, and who were sort of on a similar journey. And over the years, slowly but surely, all of us have wound up getting agents, getting published, but all in different ways. There's like
Mm,
no one way of doing this anymore. There's people who are published traditionally but don't have an agent. There's people who've self-published. My girlfriend, in fact, is traditionally published but has then self-published her second book
mm,
because publishing is very much about things fitting neatly into boxes, and your second book has to follow your first book in a certain way. She writes historical fiction, so if you write historical fiction, it has to be very close in time period. Each book you can't
right.
start writing
Mm,
different times, the rest of it. But I think now self-publishing, there's so many more options for writers. It gives us that opportunity to sort of go, okay, right, if you don't agree with this, because like I said, it is so subjective. If you don't agree with this and you don't think this is the right book, then there's another way of me doing it. So yeah. So for me personally, it wasn't something that I considered, but not because I didn't want to go down that route. It was because it never even occurred to me. I just
yeah.
simply followed that path of sort of like looking for an agent. Um, and I was really quite lucky, as I said, that I got that agent with that second book that I wrote. And then from then, obviously, it was just a case of looking for a publisher the traditional way as well through them. So, but it's not something I'd rule out. I know there are authors who sort of have deals for their hard copies of the books, but then self-publish the ebooks and things like that. There's
Mm.
just so many different ways of doing it now. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think with there being so much online and there's so many platforms that are built almost as though you can do it yourself, it makes it a lot more accessible
it
and
definitely
easier.
does.
And I suppose the self-publishing route, one of the benefits of that is it's quicker if you know what you're doing. I suppose you don't have to wait to fit into one of those boxes that you were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. You've got more freedom to sort because obviously publishing as an industry follows trends, and there's they must have a way of doing it of them sort of like knowing what kind of books will sell. They've got a lot of data, obviously, that sort of drives this. But I don't think it's that. I don't think things work the way that they used to, and I think social media is a big part of that. If a
Yeah,
book gets picked up by somebody on TikTok, then that's it. You just have to look at the growth of romantasy at the minute, which is these sort of like fantasy books with that romantic element to it, or spicy element in some cases, and that's all blown up because of TikTok. But I don't think publishing was quite aware of that, and so a lot of
mm,
self-published authors have sort of been very successful in that space. So yeah, I think it's very complex, and there's definitely not one right way of doing it, and self-publishing is definitely no less um, of a route than trad publishing. It's just a different option as far as I
just
can
an
see.
option. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think probably the advice there is to just do a bit of research and see what feels
What works
best,
for you?
fits best with what you want.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think I think there's still some self-published authors still struggle a little bit to get into bookshops. But that's a bookshop thing, that they obviously buy from wholesalers, and so getting your books into a bookshop can be tricky. But you mentioned our shortlist for the Buddy Scotland Debut Awards. Obviously, there were 5 fantastic books on that list. The one that won, Alan Gore, he was self-published. It's,
Right.
but his book won that award because it's a fantastic book. It's no
Mm,
less of a fantastic book just because it's self-published. Um, and so now he's getting a bit more recognition, as he should,
mm.
from booksellers and from the industry because of that. So yeah, I think it's just working out what works for you, basically, isn't it? And and
Yeah.
and how.
Yeah. And if you stick at it, the
Yeah,
right option's gonna
Oh,
surface
definitely.
at some point. I'm a big believer in that. Everything happens for a
Definitely.
reason, and the
Yeah,
time that it should do, and yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Well, so let's come to your book. So for the
Oh, yeah.
eventually, my plan is to get these on YouTube so that people can see us
All right.
talking
Okay.
as well, if that's
Of course.
okay. Did
Yeah.
I
No.
not say that before?
Sorry, everyone. Got dressed up a bit more.
No, you're absolutely fine. I somebody I spoke to last year, she'd just gone running and she came back, she went, oh,
Really?
I didn't realise that.
I
So
said I dressed up. I wouldn't. I'm always in a hoodie, so it's fine. Don't
makes
worry.
it more natural, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would have
Makes it
made
more
no
natural.
difference at
So
all.
yes, this is your debut novel,
Yes,
Dark Island, which is the second one that you've written, not the
it's actually the third one.
oh, it's the third one. Oh, right. Okay.
Third
Well,
one.
maybe
Yeah.
if we've got time, we can come back to the other
Yeah.
one that's
Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
in between. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the back, and then I've got some questions around this
Oh,
this
okay.
book, if that's okay. So, midwinter in Orkney, 6 hours of daylight, a race against time to catch a killer. Reporter Freya Sinclair had always known she was different. While waiting on the outcome of an autism assessment, Freya uproots her life in Glasgow, quitting her job at one of Scotland's top broadsheets and taking a local beat in her childhood home of Orkney. But her plans for a quiet life are shattered when human remains are exhumed by a winter storm on Orkney's wild Atlantic coast. Dun dun dun, as they
Indeed.
say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I started reading this because I got a signed copy, thank you very much, from you when you were at the
Oh,
local
you're welcome.
library. And I think I finished it in it's probably over about 6 days because I
Right.
read quite a bit on the plane. We were
Yeah.
grounded for an hour and 20 minutes on the way to
All right.
Barcelona. So I read a good proportion of it on the plane, which was brilliant because it just kind of threw me into the entire story. So if I could ask you why did you choose that genre, crime? There's a bit of psychological elements in there. You mentioned about writing the police academy stories, which is more of comical element.
Yeah.
So what sort of drew you to this particular genre? And yeah,
Um,
I'll ask another question after that.
oh, okay. It's what I read, to be honest. Crime fiction is probably the genre that I read the most. And over time, it's probably fully taken over. I think it's probably. I mean, I will read out of other genres. Obviously, I'm not one of these people that just says I only read this or I only read that. But it does seem to be that they are the books that I'm drawn towards. Basically, I love a mystery. I love not just reading one, but writing ones as well. I like the idea as I'm writing it that it's going to be something that somebody won't see coming, or when I know that I'm messing with somebody, that I'm putting something in that might make them think something that's not going to happen. It's a bit cruel, but I do. I really enjoy that. So yeah, so it's basically what I've always been drawn towards reading myself, so it kind of made sense that that's what I would write. As I mentioned, obviously I had that idea for a story about the guy skipping through time through his memories. That was sci-fi, but there was still ended up being a murder in it. There ended up being a crime element. Um, the next one I wrote, the one that I signed with my agent for, again was sort of speculative, so less a sci-fi, but still had that element in it. But it was still a thriller. There was still a crime. There was still a mystery to solve. So yeah, it's just something that I've always really been attracted to, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I was always into the crimes, and then the ones that got a little bit sort of darker that were more psychological.
Yeah.
And I read a lot more varied now from the
Yeah.
university masters that I did,
Yeah.
partly because I was supposed to, but also I really appreciated that fact because now I kind of I read and I listen online as well. So
Yes.
because I still read a lot. The majority of books I've got here on my bookcase and downstairs are crime of some
Mm.
way, shape, or form. But the ones I listen to, comedy. Matt Haig, I've read a lot of
Oh yeah.
recently,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I just find myself chuckling.
Yeah.
I mean, his kind of themes are deep if you've read
Mm.
any of them, but
I have.
he's
Yeah.
very comical in the way that he writes, and I think he's great at getting across those
Yeah.
sort of issues that we do need to acknowledge more,
Yeah.
but in a humorous way, so that it kind of
Yeah. But I think
like
I think in crime fiction as well, there's some very humorous crime fiction books. Squeaky Clean, Callum McSorley's one that stands out. That won the McIlvenney Award at Buddy Scotland last year.
mm,
It's a fantastic book and it's hilarious and it's very dark, but it
yeah.
is, it's hilarious. Um, Martin Stewart, who was on the shortlist with me, his book Double Proof again is another one, and I think that's the great thing about crime. There's such crime fiction, I should say. I sound like I'm
Yeah.
advocating. The genre itself, it's so broad, and even though it does deal with obviously very dark themes, there's still a lot of humour in there, and yeah, I think with crime fiction as well, you get to examine people at like the best and the worst, I suppose. Do you know what
Mm.
I mean? It's if the things that happen to people by the nature of the genre are sort of life defining and in the worst days of their lives, and you get to explore some really deep stuff. But at the same time, there's a mystery in there. There's entertainment. Yeah, it's very broad. I think there's a lot of scope for
Mm.
exploring lots of things.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I think it just keeps readers on the toes then.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why the genres explode. I mean, it's massive. You go into a Waterstones and or any bookshop, other bookshops are available, and you see the crime section. It's huge, and there's such a range in there. And you could go and randomly pick up 5 books, and every single one would be something different. It's not
Mm.
always a case that it's just a cop investigating a murder, and it's there's so much scope in there. So yeah, it's a genre that I love, and I won't ever be able to exhaust it because, as we were saying when we were talking before, and more books are coming out more quickly than I can read them. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's always going to be a good choice. What was the last book that you read?
not the one I'm reading now, the one before. You
Yeah,
mean?
what's the what? Well, yeah, what's
Yeah.
the one you read before? What are you currently reading? Let's do both.
Funny enough, there's a theme. So yeah, the last one I read was a book called Paris Requiem by Chris Lloyd. So again, a crime fiction book, but again, very different. This is his series is set in Paris in 1940, and it's a
Mm.
Parisian cop investigating crimes. But obviously, the Nazis have just arrived and have occupied Paris, and the war was just getting going at the start of the series, and it sort of follows the detective Eddie Giral through the occupation, and yeah, it's just the way it's done is just absolutely fantastic. Chris really sort of brings that time to life, and it's not done in a way that's sort of like the Nazis are the bad guys and the French are the good guys. It's not that black and white. There's so many shades of grey as it would have been, and it's just absolutely fascinating. So I'd read his first one a couple of years ago. I read Paris Requiem earlier this year because I'm writing the second book of my series, so the one to follow Dark Island. So I've been reading people's second books in series to see how they do it.
Ah,
And Chris is so good that I've broken my trend now, and the book I'm currently reading is Banquet of Beggars, which is the third one. So it's the
ah,
next, so I'm reading on. And yeah, again, like I said, it's fantastic. I hate Chris a little bit for how good it is. If he wasn't such a lovely guy, I would hate him for it because it is a brilliant, brilliant book.
yeah, a book that you wish you would have read. Sorry, written.
Well, yeah, do you know, and it's a book that I could acknowledge I never would be able to. The amount of research that he's done, and I know Chris, and this is, he goes to Paris and he does the research, and it's an area that he's sort of fascinated with. But it all comes across, and it's sort of a masterclass of like how much research do you put into a book? How do you make it
Yeah,
natural? Because he's done it perfectly. So yeah, so sometimes I find myself sort of reading books to sort of try and learn things, I suppose. Just like I said, I've been reading these second books in series to sort of see how people have done it. But Chris is so good, I kind of forgot I was doing that. I was just immersed in the story, and then it just kept
yeah,
moving on to the third one. So that's always a sign of a good book when you just could get completely
it
lost
is.
and
Can I
lose
just
forget you're reading
say,
the story.
I
Yeah,
did part of that with yours as well. So I started reading your
really,
book, and there was a few
right?
bits I thought, oh, I really like that. So I'll see if you can remember writing this. I wrote a couple of things
Okay.
down. Gripping the seat so tight, my knuckles blanched.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, yeah, I do remember that.
what
Yeah,
my one of my issues, and I'm much better at it now because I can see how I've changed my writing, was
right,
telling, not showing. So
right,
so I always pick out really good sentences from people's books where they show, not tell. And I
right.
thought that was a great one. And then the other one, he stepped into the room in an ambush of aftershave.
Yeah, I do remember. I know who that is as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I just thought so I did start reading yours, and which I have done with another one which I thought was great was Sarah Pierce.
Oh, yes.
So
Yeah. She's
yeah,
written a couple. Yeah.
sorry,
I think she's written a couple, hasn't she?
she's written three now. So the
Yeah.
first one was Sanatorium,
Sanatorium.
then the
That's,
retreat, and now the
yeah.
wild. So she was a speaker at Capital Crime
Right.
this year, and she's
Yeah.
great at the very small, very short chapters, but most of her chapters she's got cliffhanger.
Yes.
So I was like, wow. So yeah, I started making a few notes when I read yours, and just like, oh, that's
Oh
great, that's
wow.
brilliant. But then I got so immersed in the story that I
All right.
forgot.
That's pretty cool.
But like you
Oh,
say, that is a good sign of a book that's kind of got you hooked and
oh,
that
definitely. I
draws the
think so.
readers in.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
Definitely.
you take all the boxes, Daniel.
Oh, good. Oh, that's lovely. That's so weird though, because obviously when you're writing it, you're just writing, and it's a story in your head. And I've never even thought of somebody that might like read it and go, "Oh, that's a good sentence," and I know that down. Yeah, because I do that all the time.
Mm.
With other writers. So that's quite a nice compliment. Thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So, would you? Because one of the questions I wanted to ask you was where you find
Hmm.
your inspiration from. So it sounds
Yeah.
as though what I'm hearing is that you get inspired by other writers as well in similar genres with other stories.
Oh, definitely.
So yeah,
Yeah.
where do you draw your inspiration from?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I heard very early on, I think it might have even been on that first course I did, the self-edit course, was you've got to read to write. It's very hard to be a writer if you're not a reader because you like you've done there. You'll read something and you'll go, oh, I quite like that, and you sort of like want to emulate it. So yeah, definitely get inspiration from that, from reading books and thinking I want to create this feeling in someone. I want to be able to do this as well. That's definitely a big part of it for me. Um, but yeah, just I don't know. Well, funnily enough, very fitting in with the theme of this podcast, I think being out and about in nature really inspires me. Going to places, traveling. Traveling's a huge one for me. I think when I go, I want to, and I don't know if it's like a wanting to continue the journey once I get home or something, or like have that connection to that place still. But yeah, traveling to places really inspires me to want to write and set stories there,
Yeah.
and just I suppose, like I said, just to continue to be there for a bit. Um, that second story that I mentioned, the one that I signed with my agent with, um, I set that in Heidelberg in Germany. And I'd just been there to the Christmas market, and it was the
Oh,
opening scene at
nice.
the Christmas market, and there's this thing, and yeah, and it sort of like travels across Europe, and that's one of the things I love doing is sort of going on road trips and traveling to sort of like places across the continent. Um, and so yeah, so coming back from that, I was fired up. I'd had this idea of a story and of this sort of this crime that happened and this thing that would take place, but that in itself isn't enough. Having the setting as well, then sort of like really fires me up to write. And that's what happened with Dark Island. Like it was being in Orkney, it was going there and it was seeing it, and I just yeah, it's strange. Every time I go there, I seem to think of another place to hide a body, which sounds terrible, but it's definitely just being in that landscape. It just gives you sort of like so many ideas for yeah, wanting to replicate it, wanting to just write and be there in your mind, I suppose, when you can't be there physically.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I'm not sure if I asked you a similar question when you were at the library about whether it was sort of the characters that you started with, or if it was more of
Yeah.
the
Yes.
place,
Yeah. Yeah.
the where you've been with your travels. But yeah, I think it just opens up it kind of expands your mind a little bit, doesn't it, when you do traveling
Definitely.
and it
Definitely
just
does. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they're sort of like two separate ingredients, and it's only when you can bring them together that it really sort of starts to take shape. And yeah, the characters are kind of there, and you've got ideas of people that you can write about and stories that you can tell. But for me, it's not until I I know where it's set that it sort of like ignites, if you like, and then
yeah.
you and it was like that with Dark Island. I'd been to Orkney a couple of times anyway, but then there was one particular visit, and I was at Bay of Scale where this one starts, and yeah, I just imagined Freya stood there looking across the bay, the crime scene happening around Scarrow Brae, and the opening line as well actually came to me then as well, which was pretty good. So yeah, but it needed, I think, without having gone there and been in that setting and standing there and smelling the sea air and hearing the birds and everything else, it would have. I don't think it would have sort of like clicked for me quite as
Yeah.
So definitely getting out and about and visiting places and traveling, that's a huge, huge inspiration for me.
Yeah, because I think when you were talking there and, you're visually seeing things, you're smelling things, you're hearing things, you
Yeah,
can bring all of those things into the story, can't you? All of the senses and just make it more real for
yeah,
people. I think that's part of the beauty of that showing, not telling, because, people can really, they relate to certain things, or if they don't relate to it, they might have an opinion on something or
yeah,
a
yeah.
perception of something, and it just brings it to life a lot more.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, again, reading is very subjective as well. So I know everybody's different, but I like the details to be sort of like quite light, I suppose, just a little bit. I don't want a lot of description of what a place looks like. I like to sort of build a picture in my head as well.
Mm.
But definitely, I think if it helps me as a writer anyway, if I've been there to be able to do that, to write that subtly and just to give those little descriptions. It's usually a place I haven't been that I will over describe because I suppose I'm describing it for myself or trying to like
Yeah,
create a picture for myself, if you know what I mean.
yeah, that makes a
So
lot of sense.
yeah, so definitely getting out and about and traveling. I mean, it's all just an excuse for me to go up to Orkney. To be fair, to just keep going back. I'll keep claiming that that's the reason why I need to go. But no, it does. I do think it helps to yeah, to like I said, to get out and travel and to just experience new places. Because obviously, the more experiences you've got as a writer, then the more you've got to bring to the story.
Oh, most definitely, yeah. And the more accurate you can be if you are doing
Yeah,
something like, bringing in the historic element there and you're wanting something to be factually correct, even though it's in a
yeah,
fictional setting, then I
yeah,
think, yeah, all of that just helps you
yeah.
to, build more of a life. I'd say life like, we're talking about crimes and things here,
No, it's
but
part of it. Yeah, it's making it more authentic. I mean, like going back to Chris's book, as I said, I know he goes to Paris a lot. I mean, there are so many books and so many films and documentaries and so many resources about the Second World War and the occupation of France and everything else. There's a lot of research you can do from your own home. But he goes and he walks those streets and goes into the cafes and do you know what I mean? And knows what the sunlight looks like off the Seine at a certain time of day. That kind of thing.
yeah.
They're the kind of things that will bring a book to life, I suppose. And yeah, by traveling and doing those things, it not only does it give you that information to put into the book, but for me, it motivates me. I want to write about it. I want to capture that feeling that I
Mm.
had being there and writing and writing that afterwards sort of like helps me do that, I guess.
Yeah, you want to share that piece of beauty that you've
Yeah,
seen or with,
exactly. It's like taking
yeah.
a photograph. Do you know what I mean? Or something like that. Or somebody who paints a picture. This is our way, I suppose, of expressing it and of sharing it. Yeah, that's a real good
Mm.
way of describing it.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
exactly.
And I think when you mentioned before, earlier on in childhood, you watched a lot of films.
Yeah,
I think the difference between watching the films and reading the book is exactly what you've just said about, building it in your own imagination
yeah,
and, creating what I think it's it must switch on more in your brain when you read than when you kind of watch a movie because you just sort
yes,
of you're thrown into this movie. It's a little bit more like you're just watching it um from a distance, whereas a
yeah,
book sometimes I feel as though I'm completely submerged in it and I am the protagonist or I am there
yeah,
with them at their side,
yeah.
supporting them in whatever's
Exactly. Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, you can be in that space with them, and you can be sort of like hearing the same sounds and the smells. That all of that is sort of like brought to life. I think
Yeah.
through a book, which you maybe don't get the same with a film. It's just a different medium, isn't it? But for me,
Mm.
yeah, it was always writing, and yeah, I think the challenge of creating that picture in somebody else's head is a hard thing to do. Um, but yeah, yeah, traveling and getting out into nature and then trying to sort of like replicate that is definitely a big part of it for me.
Yeah, yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. Nature for me is a big
Yeah,
influence, and I find that I kind of I get in flow quicker when I'm outside. So
yeah,
it might just be sitting in the back garden on a sunny day, or it might be for sort of the day job. Oh, I'm not quite sure how to approach this project, so I'll
sure.
walk outside just to get my own body moving, to get my
Oh
mind moving
yes,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah, there's that side to it. Yeah, as well, just actually being out and moving. I mean, just yesterday, I came up with an idea for how to end the second book, and I've been waiting. That there's been something missing with that second book for so long, and I think yesterday. I think I worked it out, but it was because I was out on a dog walk, and
Mm.
whenever if you sat at your desk and you're trying to write, so it just doesn't help, doesn't work. But if you get up, go out, go for a walk, get out into nature, it does something. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about neuroscience to be able to explain it, but definitely walking around with these dogs certainly helps. Even though you don't
Yeah.
pitch any lines to me, do you? Or help me with any? No.
Maybe there's a subliminal element there and an
There is when
extra
they just stare
EFT,
at
well, not
you. Yeah.
EFT, what is it? Extra sensory perception, ESP or something like that. You know, the
Could
dogs are
be.
giving you the
Could
ideas.
be. Yeah, they do seem to listen to me when I'm rambling on at them about my book. So
Yeah.
whether they're transmitting something back.
Who
Yeah,
knows?
credit
Who
Maggie.
knows? You might be more deeply connected to the animal kingdom than you think.
Possibly.
Yeah, it's no, I love that because looking at your Instagram profile is very similar to mine. You know, there's a lot of nature
Yeah.
images on there. You know, from when you've gone out and about. I don't have a dog, but I do a lot of trail running. So a
Right.
lot of my pictures are, oh, what a beautiful look at the clouds, or look at the water glistening with the hill behind the background. You know, all that sort of stuff, and I just find it very, very inspirational and
Definitely.
sometimes when I'm on my own, you'll know the salt line in Alsager.
I do. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, yeah.
So quite often I've done a big event a couple of weeks ago. So that was part of my quite lengthy training
Right.
route that I used to
Okay.
do. And there's a part where you go under the M6, isn't there, towards the
Yes.
end of it. And
Uh-huh.
there's a fence. And then I always think I get loads of ideas when I go under that stretch because it's a
Oh, okay.
little bit hidden. And I
Yeah.
think, who could be behind there? What breadcrumbs has somebody perhaps has gone missing left
This
there?
is it. Yeah.
And
This is
yeah,
this is exactly it. Yeah, and that's kind of what. Oh, excuse me. That's kind of what happened with me in Orkney. Like, just sort of thinking, what in Orkney, lots of things are exhumed. There's lots of archaeological sites and lots of things found, and that was the kind of thing I was thinking. Like, what if there was something buried and something sort of like was uncovered? What could it be? What would be there? And why was it there in the first place? And that's it. Yeah, they go into these places. It sort of like fires these. Or maybe I'm just a bit weird that I keep thinking about bodies being buried in places. Either way, it's paying off, so it's fine. But yeah, it does. It fires off your imagination, doesn't it? And sort of just gets you sort of
it
thinking a little
does.
bit differently. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned archaeology there, and I think in your book, I think there's something that you mentioned there about Freya wanting to be an archaeologist, or
Yeah.
is
Well,
does that come from you? Were you interested in that? Is it just out
it
of
comes it
interest?
comes from what I mentioned before about sort of. I know it's a trait of being autistic that you sort of like you get these really intense interests, and when you get them, that's it. Like, this is the last thing I'm ever going to be interested in. I'm going to take it all the way to the thing, and then 2 weeks later, obviously, it's something else. So yeah, so I wanted that to be sort of like part of her character. But yeah, archaeology was one of the things I was going to do at some point. Astronomy was another. That's why I'm Spaceman Dan on on social media because I was doing an astronomy degree at the time. Yeah, it's just flicked through many different things, and
Yeah,
yeah, so I wanted that to be part of sort of like her character as well. But no, it's just such a big thing in Orkney, and that first line about nothing stays buried forever. It's
mm,
because it just doesn't. Like, things are coming out of the ground all the time in Orkney. But it was being there and seeing that sort of made me think, it'd be interesting if, yeah,
yeah. Where can you take that?
lost
And
in a
that's the start of so many different storylines, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I wanted to be an archaeologist when I was younger as well. I
All
loved
right.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I also still now every so often I have a little Google and see what sites are out there that you can book a day trip on, and go with
Oh
your
yeah.
little brush and your dusting
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
materials and see what you can uncover.
Well, I did a master's degree in Orkney and Shetland studies because this is part of just me. I just keep doing different different degrees for each
Yeah.
one.
If you could
And
make a living out of learning, that'd be you.
I'd be rich by now. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd be rich
me
by now.
too.
Yeah, instead I'm broke because I spend it all on courses. But yeah, the archaeology was part of that, but sort of like from an academic sort of side of it. We didn't actually get to go out on site, which was a shame. But yeah, it was fascinating. But I don't think I'd have the patience to sit and I've been to the sites like the Ness of Brodgar, and you can see them sort of like actually doing the digs there, and it's so painstaking and how slowly they have to go in the detail. Nah, not a chance.
Yeah.
I'd be wanting to dig it up. It's maybe not the career for me.
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is for me. I know my dad upsells quite a lot of furniture, And
All right.
a few years ago, when I moved back up to this area, I used to help him out with painting a few bits and bobs. And I do get a little bit into that sort of thing. And I am a perfectionist. I try not to
Yeah.
be, because, you know, it's not helpful sometimes. I remember he said to me, Mum, at one point, she's taking too long with this. And I'm like, I just want to do a good
Gotta do it
job.
right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
So that, yeah, I was going to ask you, just sort of reeling back slightly, who do you write for first?
Oh, hey, that's a good question. Yeah, me, definitely me. And I think that's why I will admit it's been quite hard writing this second book. Though talking to other friends of mine that have published as well, this seems to be a common thing, and my agent Ella keeps telling me as well. It's a common thing with book two. It's hard, and I think it's because of that, because you don't feel like you're writing for you anymore.
Right, yeah.
It's a strange thing writing a book that you know will be on a bookshelf, like for sure. Because this is the first time I've had that experience. Obviously, when I wrote Dark Island, I wrote it. I hoped, but I didn't know. So yeah, the first draft has to be for me. It's a story
Mm,
that I want to tell and the things that I find interesting.
mm.
Um, and then usually my agent looks at it and goes, "Okay, right, can you cut that down a bit?" Like the first draft of Dark Island, it was very long. It was far too long, because I was just waxing lyrical about Orkney, and I was just going
Yeah.
off on one about it because that was for me. So yeah, so I think the first one has to be for you. I think when I did the self-edit course, I remember them talking about it there as well. And I'm sure they said, write the first draft for you, the second draft for a reader, and the third draft for an agent or editor, or
Oh,
something like
okay.
that, which I thought was quite an interesting way
That's
of looking
interesting.
at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, first and foremost is for me. What do I want to? Because if you're telling a story that you're not interested in, then it's not gonna, nobody else
Mm,
is gonna be interested in it. Basically, I don't think. So yeah, the first one's always for me, and then it's a case of thinking, right, okay, now thinking about the genre, thinking about the kind of things that that people that your ideal reader, I suppose, whoever that might be, would be picking this up. What kind of things would they be looking for? That sort of like comes later, I think.
yeah. Yeah. And I think you almost having a look at that, a kind of bird's eye view at it almost. So you're not,
Yeah,
take
yeah,
yourself away from it a little bit to
yeah,
then view it from other people's and fresh
yeah.
eyes.
I'm really lucky that I mean writing feels like it's quite a solitary thing when you start out. It is very solitary. It's just you and you're just writing the book for you. But I think as you progress with it in terms of getting published, more and more people become involved, depending on the route you take, obviously. But I'm lucky enough now that I've worked with my agent for long enough that I can kind of hear her voice in the back of my head when I'm writing
Yeah.
certain things, sort of saying, "No, no, you can't get away with it," because she does not let me get away with anything. With like, if there's one person that knows a bit of information and the other person doesn't, and they're not telling each other, she'd be like, "Why? Why would they not tell each other? You're only holding that back just for dramatic effect. Stop it!" And so I can hear that now in, in the back of my head, so I don't do things like that. So yeah, but first of all, it's got to be for you. I think, yeah, something that
Yeah.
you enjoy, something that you want the story you want to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with sort of being part of the way writing my first one, I definitely relate to that because there's a lot of me in the protagonist. There's a lot of sort of things I've thought about or even experiences that I've been through. And I
Yeah.
like the fact that, so for me, when I did the masters, I was introduced to the autofiction concept that I'd never heard about before. So I always thought if you bring any of yourself into writing, then it's a
Mm.
memoir or it's a biography.
Right.
So the autofiction sort of says, well, you can use part of yourself as source, but then you just embellish it basically, and it can be a bit more fantastical or
Well,
whatever.
that's Dark Island. I mean, that was it for me. There's a lot of me in Freya, because when I started writing it, I'd just been referred for my autism diagnosis. I didn't know if I was or I wasn't, so I was in the same position that Freya's in, where she's sort of waiting and doesn't know, and is sort of going through all those kind of questions of, well, what if I am? What does that mean? What if I'm not? What does, I'm back at square one with no explanation for the way I feel and the way I experience the world. So I was going through all that, and yeah, putting that into the book. And again, I suppose in the first draft there was a lot more of that, of her sort of having these kind of existential crises, because again it was partly me sort of like figuring it out, I suppose. But then as you write through subsequent drafts, then you have to think more about readers, about genre, about that kind of stuff. And obviously, with it being a crime book, it needs to be more fast paced. You
Mm.
know, I need to cut some of that stuff down. Um, but yeah, I do. I think for me, the best books are the ones where there's quite a bit of the author in them because
Yeah.
that brings authenticity. You know, if it's something that you've got that personal experience of, then I think you're gonna be able to sort of like explain it better, put other people in that position as well, and yeah, it makes for a more engaging story. I feel. I don't know
Yeah.
if I achieved that myself with this one, but I hope so. But yeah, there was definitely a huge part of me in Freya.
Yeah. Yeah, you have achieved that. I
Oh,
think
good, thank
it's,
you.
the emotional side, you can bring more to it from from an emotional point of view and how that sort of
Yeah,
felt from the characters. And yeah, like you say, the authenticity of that, things have actually happened, either experienced by the self or, visually you've seen something happen between,
yeah, yeah.
an environment or other people or whatever that might be. I think the key is just not making it too obvious in
Yes, yeah,
certain senses.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. No, there still needs to be that distance, and I think. Like with my book, for example, making it third person narration rather than first person was
Mm.
another way to sort of like give it that distance because everything I'd written beforehand had been first person narration. This was the first one I'd
Okay.
written in
Mm.
third person. Um, so yeah, you're right. Obviously, it's great when people bring a lot of themselves to the story, but it still has to be. It's fiction. It's not a memoir.
Yeah.
There still has to be that sort of
Yeah.
like distance there. Yeah,
Still some boundaries.
definitely, definitely, yes.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to aspiring authors? We've talked a lot actually about the publishing side of things and the inspiration
Yeah.
side of things, and just keeping going. But is there any sort of anything that you've perhaps been through, or something that you would say, a question that perhaps crops up, or conversations you've had with other authors that this would be good advice?
Yeah, I do genuinely think that just keep going. Well, the first thing to do is remember it's meant to be fun. You know, write for fun in the first
Yeah.
instance because that's why we all start doing it. And if it's not fun anymore, then it's probably not for you. But yeah, make sure it stays fun. That's the first thing. But do just keep going. I remember going to one event with an author, and he said the difference between a published writer and an unpublished writer is the published writer didn't give up.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, that's all right for you to say, as someone who's published. But now, now I'm sitting here with a book out. It is true because I've known people who have stopped and who have given up and have decided, oh, I can't or whatever. And then I've known, as I said, this group of friends that gradually over the years that we've known each other, one by one, we've all got agents, we've all got published in one way or another. And it's because we didn't stop. We just kept
Yeah.
going, just kept writing. And I think if you love writing and it's what you want to do, then, and like I said, it's still fun for you, then there's no reason to stop. Just keep going, just keep putting the work out there. It's incredibly subjective, but take feedback when you get it, if it's feedback that chimes with you. And yeah, eventually, hopefully, you will find the person that sees the same in that book that you see in it and believes in it in the same way, or even more
Yeah.
so in a lot of cases.
That is great advice, because I think you can read these stats about, oh, such a percentage of people who've written a book get published, and it's quite low. And it doesn't tell you, though, how many people actually have written something but not gone through an editing stage, haven't even
No,
submitted it to
that's
places. There's a big grey
yeah.
area.
One of the first conversations I had with my agent when after it signed, because she was saying about how many she gets a month and how many of those she actually decides to read. But then, yeah, the vast volume that are just someone's just written something, one draft, not edited, not looked at it, and then sent it off to a bunch of agents, not just one particular one, and addressed it to them. They've sent it off to put dear sirs at the top of the email when
Mm.
it's gone to a woman and stuff like that, and have put, oh, I'm giving you the opportunity to read the greatest literary
Oh dear.
phenomenon of this century. But there's a surprising amount of that, and I think when you look at the stats overall, the amount of people that try to get published compared to the number that do, you're right. If you then look at the amount of people who take it seriously and try to get, that's a much smaller number, and therefore the proportion of people who get published out of those ones that take it seriously is way way higher. So I think that's the key thing. If you're doing this and you do want to get published and you want to get traditionally published, because obviously self-publishing is a very valid option, take it seriously. Learn try and learn the craft, try and learn about the industry, because I think that's important as well if you're
Mm,
trying to get traditionally published, because there's a way of doing things, there's a way of writing a cover letter, there's a way of doing a
yeah.
synopsis, all these kind of things that you don't know when you first sit down to write a book. Um, and authors are incredibly friendly people, I would say. That's been my experience, and we're all there on social media, and there's very, very few people that I've come across who wouldn't be happy to sort of give people a hand and give information about this kind of stuff if asked. My cover letter was essentially a copy of Will Dean's cover letter because
Right.
he put it on Twitter. He was like, "This is the letter I got my agent. Crack on if you'd like it." So I took that and put my details in, and yeah, it worked. So I messaged him and said, "This got me an agent." He was like, "Congratulations."
So
So,
Will Dean. Oh, I've already written him down for the
yeah,
last
no, he's great.
passenger. This
Yeah,
is a
Will
guy
Dean's
to pay
fantastic.
attention to.
Yeah, he's a fantastic crime author. He's got lots of books out now. His series was his original series was with Tuva Moodyson, yes, a Swedish reporter. So sort of like a similar kind of theme to Dark Island. So yeah, I'm a big fan of his books as well. But again, you always think, don't you, before you published. I remember sort of like going into a bookshop and seeing books and thinking, oh, I've spoken to them on Twitter, and oh, I know them, and it seems like we're sort of like people that you can't approach, but that's not the
Yeah.
case at all. Everyone's really friendly, so yeah, just pester authors and ask them ask them for
I
advice.
completely agree with that. Yeah, I started meeting or coming into contact with a few more authors. When I went to the Capital Crime
Yeah,
last year, and for me,
yeah.
that was more to learn from people, be
Mm.
inspired by their stories. Yes, to buy some books because I did spend too much money. And it's a good job I didn't go down on the train because I wouldn't have got back with the amount of books that I bought. But I remember writing in my journal, these are my people.
Yes.
This I fit into these people because they're so down to earth. And there were some big guys there. um oh, that's terrible. Now my brain's just gone
That
blank.
happens to me all the time. That happens to me all the time.
The two Scottish big dudes, Ian
Ranking.
Rankin and train spotting dude.
Oh, Irvin Welsh.
There you go. Mine went completely blank. They are just there talking
Yeah,
like normal people,
yeah,
having a coffee in
yeah.
a coffee
The first,
shop.
the
And
first year I went to Bloody Scotland, I was standing in the bar, and there was a guy stood next to me. He'd got a shopping bag, and it was knocking against my leg. And I turned round, and it was Ian Rankin, and he just stood there with his Sainsbury's bag, just stood there, just chatting to people. And yeah, it's fantastic that experience of these are my people. That's been my experience too. That's kind of what I felt with
yeah,
meeting the group of writers, the group of friends I told you about, who've that we've all managed to sort of like um, get agents, get published. That's when I met them, it was like, yeah, these people get it, and I think that's a key thing as well. If you do want to get published, it's not a solitary thing. You don't have to do it on your own. Find other people, reach out, meet
yeah,
writers online, and yeah, and go through
yeah.
it together.
Like-minded people who
Yeah.
can encourage you and share experiences. And
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have got this far
mm,
without them. I don't think. I think seeing them sort of do it as well, it just made it more more of a thing that you believe can happen rather than this
yeah,
distant thing that happens to other people. You see, you're like, oh yeah, I've sent this off, I've got a full request, and oh, the agent wants to talk to me, and
yeah,
you start to see all the little stages, and you start to understand that it's not this great big thing that's like a long way away. It is
yeah,
something that you can achieve if you take it seriously and you just keep going for it. So yeah,
yeah. Something
that was
that's more in reach. And then, yeah, also taking it seriously. There are all these things that you have to do, like the synopsis and the covering letter. And it's just like
sadly,
applying for a job, isn't it? In a way, covering
yeah,
letter, CV,
it is.
interview. You've got to have
It
all
is.
these preparation
There's
stages.
Yeah, and there's like with the cover letter to agents and editors and things. There's a way of doing it, and there's certain details that you have to include, and all these kind of things. Which, as I said, is not always obvious when you first sit down to write a book. Writing and getting published are like two different skills. I feel it's like there's some people that are very good at writing, but might not necessarily know how to do that
Yeah,
promotional side of things and sell yourself, and it is hard. I think a lot of us are introverts by nature. If we're drawn to a hobby where you sit down and write on your own,
on
away
your
from other
own.
people, yeah. So that is hard, but yeah, I think finding out about these things and just meeting other people and who are involved in it as well, taking it seriously is a big step. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant advice. Well, I'm taking a lot of this from you
Oh,
today,
good.
so
Yeah,
thank you. And just a couple of questions, Daniel, before we wrap up. I
sure.
mentioned journaling for me and like, writing these
Oh,
on my people. And again, partly through sort of the some of the teachings on the masters is I've learned to see my journal as another tool for inspiration and
right.
particularly sort of with the kind of the cathartic aspect of getting stuff out of your mind and then just having it on paper and then you can work with it in that
Yeah,
sense. So I am
yeah.
curious to know, do you ever journal? Is that something that
It's
you
something I've
you
started doing in the past couple of years, actually. Yeah, but you mentioned before something about techniques, and I thought, ooh, well, I don't know any techniques. I don't, I don't know what my technique is. I just open the thing and just start waffling, which is a similar way to how I write, funnily enough. So yeah, no, but it is something I started doing a couple of years ago. Went through a pretty big life change and was just struggling to process it all, I think, and to wrap my head around it. It all felt very overwhelming. And it was Nima. It was the same friend again. She said to me, she'd been through a similar thing, and she'd had journaling recommended to her as something to sort of help with it. So I've got this. I'm a writer, so I've got notebooks everywhere that I'm not writing. That's another part of being a writer. Just buy notebooks. So I picked one of them up, and I just started just writing down whatever was in my head. And I think the first thing I wrote is like, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's probably pointless, but anyway, we'll give it a go, or something like that. And here we are 2 years later, I'm still doing it because
yeah.
it does. It really helps me to, when you've got all these thoughts in your head and they're flying around all over the place and it's really hard to sort of capture them and make sense of them. It helps me to do that, to put it down in sort of like a structured way and actually look at it, I suppose, objectively as well, to give
Mm.
yourself that bit of distance from it so it doesn't feel quite as severe, quite as overwhelming. Um, it Another feature of being autistic is not really being able to process emotions very well in the sense of knowing what the emotion is. So sometimes I will feel energy, I suppose, or feel something, but I don't know. Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I really happy about something? I don't know what this is. So writing it down again and journaling it and writing about it kind of helps me make sense of that as well and sort of like get a handle on the emotion of it. So yeah, it's definitely something that I've got into over the past couple of years. I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't tell you a technique. I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong or what. I don't suppose there is a right or wrong. I'm
No.
just winging it. But I would say it is something that's really, really helpful to me now and really important to me. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to hear. And yeah, no, there is no right or wrong. There's a lot of different techniques and it's just finding something that works for
right.
people. I love free writing and I don't do it so much anymore, but writing first thing in the morning and just sort of emptying all those random things that are in your head.
That'll be the one then. Yeah, free. It's usually towards the end of the day. I'll do it. I sort of like just everything that's happened. I'll just
Yeah,
drop it all down and try and make sense of it.
yeah. But I think
Definitely.
that's the sort of the powerful part is the making sense of it and looking back
Yeah.
over it and having that sort of reflection and giving it that distance that you talked about. Because
Yeah.
without that, it's almost a bit of a pointless exercise. Because yes, well, no, I shouldn't say that because it's been beneficial in the fact that you've emptied your head, but then what was in your head, it helps to have that distance and that reflection
Yeah.
piece involved
Yeah.
because then you can make sense of something and you sort of if you're able to do that regularly or semi-regularly, you can not note the themes or recurring patterns or things that you can
That's
get curious
yeah.
about. And then that's kind of the powerful bit for me, I think.
That's really, yeah, that's a really good point actually, because now I've been doing this for sort of like a couple of years. There've been times when I don't know, I've again felt really overwhelmed or really sad about something, but I've been able to go, I'll be writing it down in a journal and think this feels familiar, and I'll be able to go back and see another time when I'd had the same thing, and it kind of reminds you of like, well, yeah, you've been here before and it was fine, and you got over it, and
Yeah.
you dealt with it, and this is what happened. And you read a few pages on, and all this good stuff had come, and it's like, okay, yeah, I suppose it helps to give you that perspective as well, which I wouldn't necessarily have if I hadn't got the journal there to sort of give me that. So, so no, I'm hooked. I'm in now. Yeah, it's it's definitely something I will keep doing. Yeah, I do think it's very very helpful to me.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to hear such a positive experience and how you've used it in different ways. And I think that does help with the and the difficulty to be able to express the emotions, if we're able to just write about that,
Yeah.
sometimes I think it sort of shows another way of feeling that emotion. So for me, and an easy one to describe is the kind of butterflies in your belly, which I think you mentioned Freya having
Mm.
the belly
Yeah. Yeah.
dancing a few times, and for me that's nerves, but it's also excitement. They feel exactly the same. So it's,
Yeah.
well, how do I know if it's
How
nerves,
do
and
you
how
this
do I
is
know?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if I'm unsure, then lean into the approach of it being excitement and get excited about it and
Oh,
not
I
nervous.
like that. Okay. Yeah. So tell yourself, right? No, we're choosing
We're
excitement
choosing.
over me. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we do have a choice on things, don't we? We might not
Yeah.
think it sometimes, but there is always a choice in how we react to something.
Yeah.
And there's probably situations where there's kind of less of a choice, but there is
Mm.
still an
There's
element of
still
choice.
definitely. Yeah. 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 Mm.
Yeah, and it's picking up on that. So yeah, so you are, as we record this, which is late November, you're currently on deadline, aren't you, for your
A little bit.
second?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's next for you in 2025? There's going to be, at the launch of the second book. What else is in store?
Yeah. That's probably the big thing. I mean, obviously, I'm still going to be promoting Dark Island. It's lovely that it seems to have found an audience, which is great. And I've had a few people ask me to do a few more events that I'll be doing in early 2025. I've been asked to go back up to Orkney and do an event there, which is good. I'm never going to say no to to an invite to Orkney. But yeah, the big thing is going to be book two coming out, which hopefully will be sort of around the summertime next year. So yeah, that will, as I said, it'll be the second in the series, so it'll sort of pick up where Dark Island left a few months after that, and
Yeah.
Freya's getting up to her shenanigans again.
Brilliant. Well, I won't ask you to explain too much about the plot or anything like that. So
I,
just
I can't just yet because it will probably change a great deal between now and what actually ends up on the shelf. So yeah, I'm not just being sort of like purposefully yeah, elusive. It's got a way to go yet. Let's
yeah.
get there. I'm excited.
But I think anybody that reads Dark Island is definitely going to be waiting for the second one to land anyway. So yeah, that's something to look forward to. And so you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter. So if you can just let people know how to reach you, how to connect with you.
Yeah. Instagram and Threads is Daniel Aubrey 13, so you can find me there. And on Blue Sky now is Spaceman Dan 13.
Ooh, what's Blue Sky?
It's like the alternative to Twitter.
Okay. I
I've
realised I called it Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore, is it
Oh,
either? It's
it will forever
X.
be Twitter. We're not calling it X.
Okay.
I'm
All
not
right.
anyway. It'll forever be Twitter to me. But I've not been on there in the past couple of weeks. I don't really go there much anymore. I think quite a few people have sort of abandoned it over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder why. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
carry on.
for reasons that that most people will be aware of. So yeah, I mean, I'm still on there, but I don't really go on much. But mostly on Instagram now, which is nice because that's the one with all the pictures on and everything. I mostly just use social media to put pictures of my dogs on anyway, so I may as well just be on that one. So yeah, Instagram's probably the best place to keep up with us. Yeah.
Great. And I think Instagram as well, you keep your feed quite up to date with where you're going to be speaking as well, any events that you've got. So that's a good place for
Oh
people
yeah,
to.
yeah. I will batter people with that information on there for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm a bit quiet on there at the minute because just because of how much writing I'm doing. But yeah,
Mm,
trying to keep on top of that. Yeah, I've not
yeah.
quite made it to TikTok yet. There's a few people sort of did braved that one, but I don't know if
I'm
maybe.
on TikTok,
Are you?
but yeah, no, it's not for me.
I was going to say, I feel like, yeah, I don't know if everyone
Yeah.
who's like teenager 20, I think that ship has sailed for me. I'd be like the parent at the party. I don't think it's like, yeah. So
Yeah, we
no,
go where we're most comfortable anyway, don't we? And
exactly,
again,
yeah.
like we were talking about, the routes now for publishing books, there's a lot of choice where people can hang out, and it's just finding what you like and
Oh,
where
yeah.
your people are, and
And
yeah.
there's loads of that on Instagram. There's loads of that on Threads. The Blue Sky, like I said, is like this. I think it was created by the people that used to run Twitter. But
Okay.
there's a great writing community on there as well, and that's taken off. I've seen a lot of authors on there, a lot of indie writers, a lot of aspiring authors as well. So yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
one to check out.
Have you got or are you ever going to have anything like a Substack or a Patreon? I know there's a few authors I follow that are on there because there's a subscription element, isn't there, with some of the
It
content that they put out
is, and
there?
I feel like, yeah, because obviously it used to be like the author website, but I think these things have kind of come in and taken over from that, haven't they? So it is something I've thought about, but I think at the minute I've been too busy either doing stuff for Dark Island or writing the second book, that I've not really had the time to sit down and do it. But it's definitely something I might consider at some point.
Mm,
I always feel nobody would be. I think who would sign up to that? Who would be interested in that? But then I see, like, I've got people following me on Amazon. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe,
maybe
maybe there
there
might.
will be.
Yeah, maybe there will be. So yeah, it's definitely something I would consider at some point. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to share? Anything that is kind of,
No, I don't think so. I think kept too long enough. I'm just thank you very much for inviting me
yeah.
on. It's been lovely, and thank you very much for your kind words about the book. Like, you've made my day saying you've noted down some of it,
Oh,
some of
you're right.
the I've written. Never thought that would
There's a
be.
few
So
more things there as well, but
yeah,
maybe I can share those to you via an email or something.
that's
But
lovely.
don't want to make your head any bigger.
Oh no, no chance of that. I hope.
No, I think as we were saying before, a lot of authors are very kind of down to earth, and there's not a great deal that gets their egos inflated
No, no,
too much.
which is
So
really nice about it because it's just, yeah, we do it.
yeah,
We all do. We're all writers. We all write for the same reason, whether you're published or you're not. We all love telling stories. We all
yeah,
love reading stories. Just some of us have had our books published and put in shops, and some of us haven't yet. That's the only
yeah.
difference I can say. So yeah,
Yeah, yet being the good word there.
definitely.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so
I
much. I've
likewise.
really enjoyed this conversation. We'll put all your social media links, copies to purchase the book and what have you in the show notes.
Yeah,
So if there's anything else link-wise that you want to share, then let me know and I'll add those into the show notes.
sure
And
thing.
yeah, best of luck with writing book 2.
Thanks. Yeah, it's on its way.
It'll be awesome. Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings two of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.